Hello, magical experimenters. Taylor Ellwood here, and tonight I thought I would talk about the topic of how to use magic or apply magic to situations in order to get results, or really how to apply pressure. And if you're thinking of the Queen song Under Pressure right now, hey, it's appropriate. Under Pressure. Right. I'm not going to sing for you any further. I used to sing in chorus, but that's not really relevant to here and now. Let's get to the topic at hand. All right, so this topic came about because somebody basically shared in the Magical Experiments Facebook group, that they wanted to know how to use magic to apply pressure to situations. And I think it's an interesting choice of words, that word pressure in and of itself. Like, what do we make of that word pressure? And so when I think about the word pressure, I think of it in regards to magic. What I think of it is as really an understanding that you are trying to force a situation into your favor, and you're trying to figure out how to create the right pressure to align variables that are in play, to align them into favor for you and what it is you're trying to accomplish. By the way, folks who are watching live, hello, and feel free to comment as I am doing this video. I will answer your questions as you do, so feel free. So when we think about this idea of applying pressure, I mean, really what we're looking at here is this notion that we're going to use magic in such a way that it's going to change the situation in our favor. And we're going to use magic really to apply pressure to a situation in order to get that situation to resolve or work out in your favor. And when I think about it, I always treat such situations as really we have to figure out what variables are at play and how we can get those variables to work in our favor. Now, let's get a little more practical here with that. Let's use a practical example. Let's say that you work in a workplace where you're in a situation where you don't exactly like your workplace. You have a number of different options. You can look for work somewhere else, get a job, right? Get a new job and, do something else. But maybe you like the job enough that you don't want to get a new job. Maybe you like the job enough or you put enough time and effort in, or you're invested because of the retirement or whatever the reason is, that you don't want to just up and quit that job. Well, then you have to figure out how can you turn that situation in your favor. What can you do to take that job and turn it into something that's working for you instead of against you, or really the variables? And so what are the variables in a workplace? As an example, are going to be your coworkers, right? The people that are with you on the same level as you are. It's going to be management, the people that are quote unquote above you. The people making the decisions, calling the shots, right? It's also going to be you. You are a variable in this, right? Something that I think a lot of magicians forget in general is that they actually are a very important variable in their own magical workings. Your magical working cannot happen without you. And you are always going to be a factor in your magical working. But a lot of times people forget that. They get so focused on the world around them that they forget about this, central reality and what it is you're going to do and how you're going to affect things. So there's you as a variable. And of course, then, and that's the people side of things. Then there is the other variables. There's the environment and the design of the environment. People are going to say, well, what do you mean, Taylor, about the environment and the design of the environment? Well, what I mean is this. If you're working in a workspace, that workspace is designed a certain way, and that design can work for or against you. I think that a lot of times people leave design out of don't really think of design. They just kind of leave it out of the equation. Well, yeah, I go and I work in a cubicle or whatever. Well, your space is something that you always want to be working with. It's something that you always want to be considering. And it's something that can really work for you or against you. And I'll share a couple of examples of that from personal experience here in a little bit. Then there's also the factor of time. Time in your workplace is also another variable that can work for or against you. The right moment of time can make all the difference in terms of something that you're trying to accomplish. And one of the things that I like to look at with magic is how to figure out the timing of things. And a lot of people approach magic with the idea of, I want to get results as quickly as possible. I don't. I don't mind getting results. They're awesome, but I want to get results in the right time and space. And so I'm very methodical about my magical work. It's not just about getting a result in the immediate gratification. We live in a culture of immediate gratification for the most part, right? People go and as an example, you go and you shop on Amazon and the next day your package arrives, right? Or even the same day. Wow, talk about instant gratification. Or you watch or you binge watch something or whatever else. That kind of impatience is a bad thing to have in your magical work. Magical work should be methodical, strategic. If you're going to apply pressure to a situation, you need to think outside the immediate bounds of your situation. You need to really realistically consider that sometimes you may have to endure some discomfort and pain, so to speak, in your situation in order to get where you want. And I say this with the experience to back it up, because I'm in a situation where, like right now, I'm working at a job I don't want to work at during the day, but everything's lining up perfectly for me to get out of that job, a little over 2 years to the day that I ended up working there. So obviously, and a lot of that is really just been an alignment of variables and bringing things together. And some of it's involved magical work and some of it's involved mundane work, which, speaking of which, brings us to another variable: the mundane aspects of what you're trying to do. If you're trying to apply pressure to a situation, you want to be thinking about those mundane actions that you're going to be utilizing in order to get you where you want to go. And again, welcome to all the people who are here watching. If you want to comment or ask questions, feel free to. I definitely welcome it and encourage it. All right, so we've kind of gotten a sense of a holistic perspective of, in this case, in a workplace, what are the variables we have to consider? So let's say you're in a situation at your workplace. You've decided you're not going to go look for a job, but you want things to change in your workplace. Well, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to share a couple of practical examples of things that I've done when I've worked at different locations that have helped me. One that occurred a long time ago, back when I started working as a tech writer at Boeing, was that I was working for a boss that was very temperamental. Like, he could make your life miserable really quick. And one of the things that I knew is that I couldn't leave that job. I had gotten it, and it was my first tech writing job, and I needed the experience. Plus, it was a year-long contract, and let me tell you something. When you're a contract worker and you have work for at least a year, that's a good thing. You know that you're going to be taken care of for a while. So I had to do a couple of different things in my situation in order to apply pressure to that situation to resolve it in my favor. And in my case, what I wanted is I didn't want to get fired. And if anything, I wanted my boss to become my ally. I wanted to turn him from being my enemy into my ally. And so what did I do? I made some strategic choices. One of the first things I did is I went into his office space when he wasn't there one time, and I set up some magical workings to basically soften his emotions, for lack of a better word. What I did is I basically cooled him down and made him more amendable and agreeable to me. I didn't really care if he was amendable or agreeable to anyone else. I just cared that he was amendable and agreeable to me. The other thing I did is I actually created an entity out of the job or out of the specific project that I was working on. And I had that entity help me learn about the program that I was writing about and also help me learn technical writing. So I applied pressure to that situation in two different ways. I created an entity in order to help me become better at my job. And at the same time, I set up a magical working to basically soften up my boss and make him more agreeable and amendable to me. After, this happened about the second month, and I would say within a couple of weeks, I saw an immediate improvement in my relationship with him and in the work that I was doing. He became much more agreeable. And within a month or so after that, he was taking me into his confidence in ways that he wasn't with full-time employees there. Yes. So applying pressure to situations can work. Now, I want you to understand one thing about this, though. You have to understand human psychology. I am a firm believer and studier, and I study psychology, and I study social behaviors, and I watch what people do and why they do them, and I try to figure them out. I'm one of those people who as a kid, and even now, in my 40s, I am not exactly comfortable with human behavior. If you were to meet me and you were to have a conversation with me as an example, you would find that there would be times where I would have trouble meeting your eyes because I don't like looking at people in the eyes, for example. Other little quirks and things like that, and that's okay. But I have learned how to study. I've learned to study human behavior and watch what people do and why they do what they do. And so part of how I apply pressure in a situation where I'm trying to resolve it in my favor is I really look at the human behavior involved. What is it I need to do to get where I want to go and get what I want? And at the same time, how do I do it in a manner that, ideally fits within the overall vision? In my current job, as another example, I've created a couple of different workings around my cubicle space. One of them is a wealth magic working that actually involves magnets and little metal balls that are hanging upside down from the metal ceiling thing, and it's really cool. It's designed to help me get more leads. It's designed to help me basically magnetize and attract the customers that I'm talking to, so that I discover like what they need, and then I'm able to pitch them. And I've noticed since I've created that working that my sales leads have gone up. I mean, I generally meet my quota every single week, and I get some extra benefits out of it. They have this rewards program at work, and I get a whole bunch of star points basically, which allows me to get other nifty neat things. And basically, like, it allowed me to get a $500 Amazon gift card. Okay, that's freaking cool. Like, if you've never had the pleasure of spending like $500 on yourself just for the sheer fun of it, knowing you could do it, well, let me tell you something. It is absolutely gloriously decadent. But again, I applied pressure to that situation. The way I applied pressure to that situation is I took into a couple things. One, I was in an experimental mood, and I wanted to see how I could use gravity and magnetism as a form of wealth magic. So yes, I literally used gravity and magnetism as the elemental forces that I was working with in order to help attract people. But the second thing I did is I really focused the magic around helping me identify specific opportunities, phrases, other things along those lines that would allow me to start the process of funneling them into a sales conversation. And it's worked out very well. The other thing I did is I set up that workspace with my current boss where basically everything is nice and peaceful and happy, and there's good communication and all this other stuff, and my coworkers and all this other stuff, because again, I like to create a very harmonious spaces. If you ever had the fortune of visiting my house, you'd see that too. I like neat, organized, harmonious spaces that are clean, where everything is just kind of funneled and directed in certain ways, and so I do that at work as well. I look at a cubicle space and I start thinking, how can I shape this in certain ways using principles of design and principles of magic together in order to create a very specific experience that allows me to do what I want to do, and at the same time applies pressure to situations in my favor. And that's basically what I found at this job. It's worked out really well. So let's say you're in a situation where you're working with a boss, right? Somebody that maybe doesn't like you or has passed you over for a promotion or something like that. Well, how do you take this situation and cause it to go in your favor. You start looking at how to apply pressure to it, and you apply both mundane and magical pressure. The mundane pressure is through the actions that you take at your job and your social interactions and things like that. The magical one is basically looking at how that environment is shaped. Like, who are the power players? And how can you apply magic toward them in order to direct them in the ways that you want them to go? So if I want my boss to suddenly like start noticing my behavior, I might do a magical working where I create a specific type of attraction working, where I want my boss to see me a certain way. I may not necessarily want my boss to see everything about me, but I want my boss to see me a certain way. And so I'll create that attraction working and design it around the principles of, I want this boss to notice me in this light. Or let's say again, I'm dealing with a boss that is, micromanagerial or whatever else. Then I'll figure out ways to change that behavior in my favor. One of the things I like to say is that, sometimes when you have like a micromanager, you actually have to micromanage the micromanager. And how do you do that? Well, you do it a couple different ways. One, you create the interaction and you control the interaction every day with the micromanager. If you're micromanaging them, you're proactively telling them what you're doing and managing how they're going to manage you, which turns them at that point into your allies because you're getting things out of them that you want and getting them to see your job performance in a certain way. And magically, it's one of those cases where what you're also doing is you're basically creating a glamour around yourself and their interactions with you. And you're applying that glamour as a form of pressure to get you where you want to be in relationship to them. Because you're getting them to see you a certain way and behave towards you a certain way and interact with you. So when I think about pressure, I always look at the variables of a given situation. And I ask myself, what can I do to tweak these variables? What can I change? What can I change about myself? What can I change about other people to whatever degree I can? What can I change about the environment itself? And how can I use space and timing in order to get me where I want to go? Now, it all sounds terribly methodical and everything else, and it is in some ways. It's very strategic. But I think that, if you're going to practice magic, you should be strategic. It's not just about getting things to happen when you need them to. It's about getting things to happen at the optimal time for you, in the optimal space. And it's about creating circumstances that work in your favor instead of against you. Because what's the point of getting a result if then right afterwards it just, you have things working against you? I don't go for that. Like for me, magic is about life design, because that's for me exactly what it is. I am designing my life. I'm crafting it. And yeah, am I always in control of everything? No. But I can tell you that even in circumstances where things haven't worked out in my favor in the short term, they always end up working out in the long term because I find ways to make them work. I take my short-term circumstances and I learn from them, and then I adapt and I adjust, which is actually another principle of magic that I apply to, everything I do. Adapt to the situation and then adjust the situation in your favor in order to turn it into something that works for you instead of against you. You do that, and like that right there is a principle of pressure. You adapt to the pressure. You accept that it's there, like the pressure working against you. You adapt to it. You flow against it. You become part of it. And then you turn it around. You adjust it and turn it into your favor and move it forward to get you where you want to go. That's a huge part of how I do magical work. It's a different way of looking at things, but when you look at magic differently, when you step outside the conventional and embrace the unconventional in your magical work, and when you look at a situation and you ask yourself how you can take that situation and frame it and turn it into something that actually works in your favor, what ends up happening is amazing stuff. And that to me is like what magic's all about. Let's make our lives amazing. Let's transform our situations into our favor. So hopefully this video has helped giving you some ideas, and feel free to comment, leave questions, whatever else. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and click on the little bell so that you get notifications when I do videos. And otherwise, I wish you all good night and see you next week.